Okay, let's go ahead and kick off. So, first off, my name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of TTS. I'm also the Chief Security Officer here. And I have had the pleasure in the last few years to be heavily involved in the biotech space among our clientele, seeing modern trends about up since COVID hit in 2020 all the way to 2025. And I'm going to be the first to say it's a wild ride. My background is running a cybersecurity MSSP, so that is a security provider that does managed SOC services. But I also have roots and I have ties to the insurance space, which we'll talk about later on. And I'm all things cyber risk. That's what I'm about. That's what I do. Go ahead and let somebody in. Nope, that's not thing going in there. So let's go ahead and dive into the meat of today's presentation. Basically, what's going on, right? Well, let me back up real quick and give you broader context. Risk is usually managed in a monetary sense, right? Like you have to measure risk based on what could it possibly cost us. One of the things that's big here in the United States right now in the last few months has been the LA fires. They've been absolutely devastating. Combined with the high property values out in Los Angeles and just the uncontrolled nature of these fires, people have lost homes, and the insurance industry, according to LA Times, as of the end of January, is looking close to $250 billion in damages, which I don't want to minimize. I actually have a brother that lives out in LA, and it's been really hard on the local populace. And that number sounds huge, and our hearts go out to them, justifiably so. But one of the things that always catches me off guard is if you look at this year from Forbes and the World Economic Forum, we're estimating by the end of 2025, we're going to see up to 10.5 trillion with a T in damages, or more than 40 times what the LA fires costs worldwide, just due to cyber criminals and cyber hacking. We don't talk about this enough, in my opinion. It is a astronomical problem. For context, I mean, think about this on a global macroeconomic level. If we get down to the real nitty gritty of biotech startups and getting up there, the world economy in 2023, I believe, is around $105 trillion, give or take. So when you see something like this, I mean, that's literally 10% of the world economy in 2023 off the top. It is absolutely bonkers how this is raising costs. And we're going to talk about the why, how, and specifically what relates to the biotech industry. So I used to hear this a lot. I don't hear it as much anymore. I'm such a small startup. They're never going to come after me, right? There's other big conglomerates. They're going to go after the Pfizers of the world, the AstraZenecas. They're not going to come after me. That probably would have been true and held water till about 2018, 2019. Let me explain. So 2020, the world changed, right? Work from home became a thing. We realized we didn't, not especially in a lot of verticals like biotech, we didn't need these giant offices. We could hire remotely, and it was we just doubled down on that, right? And also we saw an advent of more and more automation, of AI. We saw that things were booming in terms of productivity. And unfortunately, we saw another advent, the as a service. Oh, welcome, Vishnu. We're just in the middle of this, but go ahead and tune in. So we saw an advent of automation tools. We saw an advent of AI, and we saw that the cyber criminals that used to orchestrate these attacks, the nation states and whatnot, they realized there was a more profitable methodology. Namely, they realized they could sell the tools that accomplish cybercrime and accomplish data breaches to other people via, worldwide marketplaces and cryptocurrency on the dark web, and actually just be as a service solution. You've heard of ransomware as a service, maybe. You've heard of phishing as a service, maybe. They sell these tools like the SaaS ecosystem. And what that allowed them to do is between efficiency, automation, and more bodies, they also realized in the Western space, especially in the United States, small business, startups, we're 50% of the economy. There's a lot of money. And with the efficiency gains gathered, they realized that it was a much easier, lower hanging fruit to go after mass numbers of startups and small businesses. And the data bears that out. So I'm not going to read all these stats. These are more for edification. I've linked my resources in the bottom. But just to give you an idea, almost 1 in 10 in 2023 were hit with ransomware. And we're seeing the costs go up. For a larger business to deal with an incident, especially one that involved insider threats, namely an employee going rogue, stealing data, trying to sell it, or just trying to wreck things because they're, begrudging. We saw the cost on large businesses go up to $23 million on average being spent on this. But even for smaller organizations, and when I say smaller, I mean sub 500, so it's a wide range there. we're seeing an average of 8.13 million going into actually addressing these problems in terms of uh, being hit, having to address it proactively. I mean, the budget keeps going up and up. You may have heard of this. This is a pretty well-known story in the biotech, and I want to talk more about this later on. But just to give you an idea of the kind of stuff we're seeing, there was a biotech company, a lab company called Enzo Biochem. They got ransomware. The details of what happened there in terms of if they paid or not aren't up for debate in terms of they're not publicly available. That's a private thing. However, we are seeing that, even after they got hit, the governments came after them and they had to settle out at the end of this year for last year, 2024. They had to settle out for about $4.5 million. And this is just one example. And I want to talk about the bottom paragraph in a second, specifically what they did that was wrong. But before I do that, why biotech? Seriously, why would biotech be a focus? You have to understand hacking and cybercrime as it was is not the same as it was in the 90s. I used to love a movie from 1995 called Hackers. I still do. I still watch it occasionally. It's great. It's all about fight the world, activism, and it's a cheesy, great Saturday night movie. But the cyber criminals of today, whether nation state backed or private, tend to be focused on monetary gain. We are seeing more and more third world and sanctioned companies or sanctioned countries sponsoring cyber criminals to leverage and prop up their regimes and economies. North Korea is a great example. We just saw in the past week that there is a North Korean linked cyber group, and again, this is still actively being investigated, that managed to run off with $1.5 billion in Bitcoin out of a blockchain. If that's true, and if they were North Korean based, the $1.5 billion, even after it's laundered, goes a long way to funding things that sanctions are otherwise supposed to stop. And we in the biotech industry, especially in the startup VC space, I mean, we put out these very fancy announcements on our webpage saying, hey, we raised pre-seed, seed, Series A. So what do criminals see? They see it as, oh gosh, I know they have money. I know they have money. It's all a matter of how do I get the money because they've posted on their website they have money. Biotech is heavy because criminals want to go where the money is. Specifically, they're after lucrative gains more often than not. About 90% of cybercrime now is financially motivated, give or take, and this can vary depending on who you ask. And only about 10 to 9% is espionage related. So, yeah, this industry is being hit hard, and I'll come back to that. But it's not just this industry. I'm saying we're under an epidemic. About 53% of small to medium-sized businesses, and again, as I mentioned before, that's under the 500 mark of employees, were hit by a cyber attack in 2023. And we're seeing the numbers rise. I'm really interested once some 2024 reports come out because I'll be able to get better data. But we saw in between 22 and 23 about a 5% increase overall. It was 48% of small businesses roughly were hit in 2022. We're seeing about in 2023 about another 5% to 53%. Insurance, we have to talk about insurance. If you're in the VC space, especially, and you're trying to raise for your startup, I wish you the best of luck, especially in the current market. It seems to be getting a little better, but you'll probably get this paperwork of a list of things your investors expect of you before they give you the check. And one of them is they're probably going to ask you to carry cyber insurance. Most investors aren't dummies. They know, at least on a macro level, what's going on. And here's the problem with cyber insurance right now. I am all for cyber insurance. So if you didn't hear this before, I have deep ties to the insurance community. I myself am a cybersecurity professional, but I believe in cyber insurance. We need a financial fail-safe when everything goes wrong. The problem is, in 2020 and 2021, cyber insurance carriers took a beating. They took a beating. On average, before 2020, they were seeing about 47% loss ratios, which means for every dollar they collected, they were spending about 47 cents, which isn't too atypical in the insurance space. Then 2020 and 2021 came along, and my friend Andy loves to talk about this over at Fifth Wall Solutions. They started getting pummeled. We were seeing on average 73, 67%, so two-digit increases. On top of that, some carriers were as high as 114%, meaning for every dollar they collected in premium money, they were spending $1.14. That doesn't work as a business model. So they had to adjust. And we see that numbers reflected in 2022 and 2023 onwards, where the ratios go back down to normal. How did they adjust? They raised their premiums, so it's more expensive to get cyber insurance now. They have been reducing coverages, meaning they are very articulate about what they will and will not cover. And there's very specific language in the policies. And also, too, they tightened up underwriting standards. It used to be you just had to fill out a form saying, here's our revenue, here's our expected growth, here's our staff count, and here you go. For $800, we'll give you $1 million coverage. That is not how that works anymore. We've seen premiums going up. They're collecting more money as the carrier industry, but the loss ratios are going down. On average, they're around 42%, meaning for every dollar they take in, they're spending about 42 cents total on altogether. Compare that to the average of 73% in 2020. So insurance, still needed, still an advocate, but it's gotten a little more rough on the road. Well, what do I mean by that? I do see claims getting denied. Now, I have to be careful here, and my friend Andy will be watching this, so I'm going to be very careful. I am, again, not demonizing cyber insurance. We need it. But a lot of people aren't reading, or they are shopping policies from agents that don't understand the policy. So when they do this, top reasons we see cyber insurance claims denied. First off, they don't have enough insurance. As I alluded to earlier in this presentation, getting insurance for this stuff is more expensive, and the aggregates, the cost of what the insurance pay out, has also gone up. On average, I'm seeing somewhere around $1 to $1.4 million being spent, worst case scenario, amongst small businesses from tail to end. So usually a cyber event, it's not one event. It's usually a long-winded thing that takes 6, 8, 9 months sometimes and multiple claims to get through. They run out of money on $1 million policy and they have to pay the rest out of pocket. Another thing I see a lot is the rules of how you're supposed to handle an adverse cyber event, a hack, a ransomware event, some kind of financial theft. They're still not well understood as a macro industry. We see people work out of a reactive state because, especially in business leadership and the C-suite, because they never made a plan for this before. So they react and they start trying to engage consultants and third-party services. And the problem is these carriers have a very strict rule set of what they will and will not spend money on when it comes to resources to get you back up and running. You have to run them by the carrier or use the carrier's preferred list of vendors. For example, the carrier is going to have a preferred breach coach, which is a lawyer that's going to advise you on the regulatory stuff. They're going to have a preferred IR team. That's somebody like me who comes in and says, okay, what are we dealing with here? How do we fix it? How do we document everything? Where is the extent of the damage? I'm going to be compiling a big, long report for that lawyer to review. These are all things that have to be pre-approved by the carrier or worked off their list, and a lot of people don't even know that it's in their policy. If you have a cyber insurance policy, I strongly recommend reaching out to your agent/carrier to get that list. And the third one, now this one is the one that gets the most headlines, even though in my opinion, it's significant, but it's not the end all be all, which is some people attest to stuff. So when you fill out an insurance application, there's what's called a warranty, right? Hey, I'm attesting I have things like multi-factor authentication, like phishing email filters, like cybersecurity training. And some people will have it at the time of the application and they got turned off, or worst case scenario, they let the agent fill it out for them. The agent didn't realize they just checked the boxes. So they lied on the warranty. And that's where it can get you in trouble. You file compliance, you file due diligence, your claim doesn't get paid because you attested to something the carrier thought they were insuring for in your risk profile and you didn't have it. There's a really famous case from Travelers Insurance about a company called ICS. I wish I put this in my slide deck. I didn't. This is popping into my head. But long story short, Travelers insured a company called ICS for $1 million. ICS got ransomware, and it actually went in when they called in the IR and legal teams. They said, hey, okay, let's see what we're dealing with here. They realized, even though ICS said on their insurance application they had turned on multi-factor authentication for all their stuff, MFA, they didn't. So Travelers sued, saying we don't need to pay this out. You misattested, and Travelers won. I think they ended up going through multiple rounds of appeals, and then I think on the second round of appeals, if I remember the story correctly, you can look this up. It basically came out to the settlement was, look, Travelers said to ICS, we're not paying your insurance, but if you agree to drop these rounds of appeals, we won't make you pay our legal fees. That's how that court case ended up. That's a worst case scenario. So what are we dealing with here? Standards change, and for risk, when it comes to managing risk in any industry, biotech or otherwise, insurance companies are going to end up setting the bare minimum standards. When it comes to insurance, you got to meet the standards if you want to get a payout. I will also warn you in advance, for insurance claims, they typically don't pay out overnight. On average, I see between 60 to 120 days between the time a claim is filed, between the time a check is cut. So be aware of that. It's like any insurance policy. Very rarely are they paying same day. There are a few exceptions. I believe there is some insurance policies that will pay for a ransomware payment, for example. That's obviously going to be a little quicker than 60 days. But again, even those are getting harder to find. What does this mean for the biotech industry? Okay, that was a lot of data. That was a lot of data. But what does this mean? TLDR. If you're going to be successful at fending off these threats and be a disruptor, especially with the market footprint that we have in terms of PR, as I mentioned earlier on the slide deck, we tend to announce in the biotech industry, hey, we've raised pre-seed, seed. Here's how much money we raise. One of my clients announced they raised once upon a time a Series B, and I literally saw a 300% increase of attacks on their online accounts overnight. Just to give you kind of the context of what we're dealing with. You have to be serious about due diligencing your security controls, because security controls are weird. They may be turned on initially, but we found out, especially when there's multiple hands getting on, people turn them off, people uninstall them, people don't use them, they don't do their training, they tell, hey, they ignore the phishing email stuff, they uninstall the anti-malware on their computers, and the list goes on and on. You need ongoing due diligence to make sure you remain in compliance with your insurance policy. So not if, when something eventually happens, you have insurance that's rock solid, you've met the claims, you have the right policy, and your worst case scenario always going to get backstopped and paid. Okay, what kind of stuff are we talking about? What's the diligence? I want to go back to this story. This one's interesting. Read the bottom one. So when the Office of the Attorney General investigated, what got Enzo Biochem in trouble? The OAG later found out that they had 2 login credentials shared between 5 Enzo employees. So 5 employees were using the same username and the same password, and one of the passwords had not been changed in the last 10 years. The last 10 years, which put Enzo at a heightened risk of cyber attack, the OAG said. The company also did not use multi-factor authentication for remote access to email. This is not super complex stuff, right? I mean, this is, hey, don't share passwords. Hey, make sure you turn on that little prompt on your phone to make sure when you check your email, you're actually you. It's prompting to make sure you're actually you. But without the due diligence, obviously, I would suspect that this would have at least been broached at once upon a time in a company like Enzo Biochem. Hey, we should be doing these things. But without the due diligence and the discipline to adhere to it and make sure that we are actually checking that it's been done, yeah, obviously, it only takes people being lazy or people misunderstanding something one time, and you end up in this kind of situation. So it's simple mistakes that tend to get companies in trouble, especially in the biotech space. It's not super complex hacks. It's not, oh, they attacked me with some, cool keyboard screen. No, it's you clicked the phishing email. You used a weak password that most people are using. You had MFA, but you turned it off because it was inconvenient. More often than not, I see stuff like that gets us in trouble. Here's some of the things that are going to be expected by the insurance industry. This is what I consider the bare minimum. This is, hey, we have a control on our risk that's comprehensive. MFA, multi-factor authentication. Consultant, technical controls is big in the biotech. We live off of consultants, especially if you're in the pharma side of biotech. You got to have consultants for FDA clearance. You have to have consultants for clinical trials. You have to have consultants for this. And we don't control the data that flows onto their personal devices because you're not going out and buying laptops for a consultant. That's kind of the whole point, right? There are ways to control where the data goes when they flow, but you have to be strategic about and implement it. You need to have some kind of service or SOC solution, and we call that managed detection response, that can give you the canary in the coal mine cry. Hey, this is a problem. Something's going on. You want to get in front of it so you can triage, you can minimize the damage. And as I mentioned previously, a lot of times when companies get hit, they don't have plans. They don't have plans for when their main email provider goes down for an extended period of time. We're living in a world where it's not unreasonable to think Google or Microsoft's going to go offline for a few days and you can't use your email or your OneDrive or your Google Drive. Incident recovery plan. Hey, what do we do if we actually get hit? What's the order of operations? Having that planned out to know from when we discover it to when we call the insurance company to when we engage the insurance company. What is the steps that we can all expect to go through? And last but not least, cybersecurity training. It's still not enough out there right now. We're seeing these advent of platforms, but engagement, unless it's held, people are held to account. People do not like to do cybersecurity training, no matter how engaging they make the content. I literally have used a platform where it makes it a movie scene of like, spies and criminals running around. People said, I got other things to do. I need to go do it. And unless there's somebody walking at the metrics and making sure people are actually doing the basic security training, nobody wants to do it. The problem with that is people don't think it'll happen to them in terms of, a gap in their knowledge, clicking on something they shouldn't click on, giving out information over email they shouldn't give to until it actually happens. I've never had an incident where someone thought they were negligent in their cybersecurity training, but in terms of the person who clicked the email, they didn't think they were negligent in their cybersecurity training. They thought they were pretty smart. Well, they clicked the email. They didn't know about this very common scam vector. I had one recently. It was a person on the personal side, not business. But one of the scams I'm seeing a lot of is related to online marketplaces, namely, hey, so and so selling something from their house, and they get a message from Facebook, from eBay, whatever. Hey, I want to buy it. I live kind of far away, so can I pay you now? And I'll come pick it up in a week or two. Cool. They pay them through a platform like Venmo or PayPal. And then what happens is, the payment, say you agree at $200 as the payment. The person who says they're buying the thing from you, they'll send you $600. And of course, you're going to raise an eyebrow and go, what's going on here? And they're going to go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to send that to you. Please send me the $400 back. I can't afford to give you 600. Well, you're a good person. You're not going to take money that doesn't belong to you. You're going to send that back. And what happens is then a day later, Venmo or PayPal sends you a notification telling you, hey, this originated from a stolen credit card. We need to take the full 600 out of the account again. And you were played because you didn't know about the scam as a patsy to launder $400 from a stolen credit card for a criminal to be able to spend their ill-gotten gains. Again, nothing crazy in that scenario, but if you didn't know about it, I'll be honest, I would have a high likelihood of falling for it. Education's important. Okay, we powered through this. We keep our presentations short here because time is money and we have things to do. What's our offer today for you if you attend or watch the recording on this? Well, we have two things. One is a free cyber defense readiness assessment at ttscyber.net. This is a free 10-minute self-assessment that you can just check to see if you're missing anything obvious at your biotech firm that you would want to put in place in light of the evolving landscape. But the other, I have to be careful here. I am not a licensed insurance agent, and I am giving insurance generic. So I'm partnering with the oldest cyber insurance brokerage in the United States. Fifth Wall Solutions is my trusted partner, and they have offered to join aside me to give a free review of any existing cyber insurance policies to make sure you're not missing gaps. Because last thing with insurance, we are seeing the rise of something called sublimits. What's a sublimit, you might ask? Well, you might have a policy for $2 million, but when you read the fine print of your policy, you might see in there that for financial fraud, and I speak from my own insurance policy because they got me on this one in terms of I had to catch them, you only have a limit of $250,000. If someone takes money from you, the insurance isn't going to pay $2 million. They're going to cap at $250,000. The average business email compromise I'm seeing is 6 figures. That's how much money cyber criminals are successfully wiring out of bank accounts. That's an important one to know. But a lot of people just see, hey, there's a 2 million aggregate at the top of the policy, but they don't read all the pages of sublimits beneath them for ransomware, for business email compromise, for reputation harm, business continuity harm. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't prescribe to advise on insurance policies, so we brought a trusted partner that only does that. By scanning this QR code or going to ttscyber.net, you will get both. Upon completion of your free cyber defense readiness assessment, one of our team will be reaching out to set you up an appointment with Fifth Wall Solutions. All right, here's your plan of action, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. I try to get done 5 minutes early every time for question and answers. My opinion, every biotech firm should be doing one of 3 things. They should be getting the right insurance coverage, parentheses, read the fine print. Don't shirk when it comes to due diligence of evolving standards just because you're a startup. And sadly, that doesn't save you in the court. It doesn't save you from a cyber criminal. You need to understand what the bare minimum is and make sure you're at least doing that. And again, just to stress this, when it comes to insurance, when it comes to due diligence, read the fine print. It's really important. This vertical, this marketplace is changing yearly. The security threats are rising. We are seeing obviously more and more geopolitical tensions. We're seeing the rise of different kinds of verticals. I'm seeing the rise even on the insurance side of what they won't cover and what they will cover depending on what you have in place. You need to be at least reviewing this stuff once a year because it is changing every year significantly. Okay, well, with that, that is my spiel, and I am right at time. 5 minutes left. I'm going to open up for the last 5 minutes for any kind of Q&A that's in the audience, and we will go ahead and answer any outstanding questions you have. I'm going to give it about another 30 seconds to make sure I'm not late. Anyone slow typing gets their chance, but otherwise we will go ahead and end. I talk fast, so I always make sure I slow down at the end. I want to make sure anybody needs a chance to think or formulate their questions. Ah, Vishnu, thank you, sir. I'm not seeing anything on our social media stream for our private chat. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and end. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, be safe out there, be aware, and remember, if you're interested in our freebie for this day, it's ttscyber.net. Thank you.